So I'm conspicuously missing artists. We're going to do this a different way. I'm Brandon Righteous. I'm the senior curator here at the Missoula Art Museum. Thanks so much for coming out this morning. We're really excited to have the opportunity to present this exhibition. It's a wonderful collection of enormous import to the state of Montana in our collective art history. It tells the story of the coming of modern and contemporary art to Montana. And I think if you look around the room, you can see all those little connections between artists and friendships and pieces. And it's really a tremendous story. And every time I see pieces by these artists held in conjunction, I learn a little bit more about what that story is. And for those of you who were here last night, we heard from John Armstrong and Laura Millen just about how grateful we are to the Autio family and what this means to the museum to be able to present this wonderful exhibition. And since things have changed a little bit, initially we thought this was going to be kind of a round robin, you know, and it was, look how many of you there are. So it's really difficult to move from piece to piece when there's, I don't know, 40 or 50 people. So I'm just going to leave the microphone right here. These can be for speakers in waiting or for people with tired feet. And you can just come up here and you can talk and you can share. There's some of you who we've asked to speak about particular pieces. We've got a second microphone here if we have two speakers at once who want to have a conversation. But we'll just present it like that, where here we are together, surrounded by this wonderful artwork, and we've got stories to tell about Lela and Rudy. We've got stories to tell about our own artwork, and we'll kind of do it like that. So I think it'll work out really well. We're really grateful to MCAT for filming this. We've been able to, we've gotten a media assistance grant to be able to film this and preserve this little bit of art history for future generations through MCAT support. They've been very helpful this last year in recording in many of our public presentations like that, and we're very thankful for that. We'll put those up on the website afterwards so you guys can watch yourselves speaking to the audience and make sure that you look good in front of the camera. I'll just start out and say a few words about the exhibition and for those of you who missed it last night. And then I don't know if I'll invite somebody up. Maybe I'll turn it over to the Autios. That seems like the most appropriate thing. And they can get us started off on the right foot. But assembling this exhibition happened very quickly. It was an exhibition that Laura had talked about with Lela for some time, and it wasn't coming together for one reason or another, and we never put it on the books. And it was something that we looked at in the future and kind of imagined. And then we went on with our planning and filled in our schedule as we do, and we had a kind of a calamity happen where we had to cancel an exhibition, a major exhibition in the largest space in the gallery, 3 months before the exhibition was to open, which you never want to do, right? And we put on our thinking caps and we said, well, what could we do that would have the biggest impact? What would be the most meaningful for our state, for our institution, for our audience? And as we thought this would be the exhibition that we would choose to do if we could do it. And we didn't know if the audio kids were ready for that, but we sent them an email and approached them, and they amazingly were right at that moment where they were kind of cataloging things, photographing the majority of the work. Chris has been doing exhaustive photographs of everything in the collection. How many was it, Chris? 2,000, 4,000, 6,000?
It will be about 2,800 photos.
2,800 photos, and it's an amazing process. They've been working on the house and cleaning the house, and this was kind of a great way to transition some of these objects that were so rooted in a specific place. You think you couldn't walk into the living room without thinking of this Askavold painting kind of on the wall in the entry. And so it was kind of hard to imagine what that would look like in a museum space, in an institutional setting. And it's really because of Lela and Rudy's long support of the museum, carried on by all their children, that were able to do this, so we're really grateful for that. That's about all I'll say. We wanted to have it be comprehensive. You'll notice, surprisingly, that there is a lack of material by Lela and Rudy. If you think about how much material the family has, they have an amazing resource of material by those artists that they've saved throughout the years of their own work, and things that they've wanted to maintain, kind of as an art historical record, or for themselves or for their children. So there's so much work there, and we wanted this not to focus just on those two, but we wanted this exhibition to really tell the story of their support of Montana artists. And you can see that there's from some of the early pieces, as you come into the gallery, you'll notice their teachers, people they admired, important early friendships, and then kind of moving into students and mentorships and colleagues that they worked with, both at the high school and at the university. And then as you shift back here, it was really these friendships that happened from being in the state for so long, and showed itself as support for the arts. We always say that this riotous back corner with the color, the bright color, was really Lela's vision for her love of art and artists, and you can really see that kind of energy and bright color. And she was the steward and caretaker of the collection for many years, and really did a lot of work, a lot of organizational work, trying to figure out everything that she could about these pieces. It was really so well organized, and it made our job of selecting works and then working on the labels and kind of doing some of the research. Because the show happened so quick, it's not, this is just the kind of the beginning of scholarship. This is one of MAM's commitments, is to Montana modernism in general, the whole story of how modernism developed in the state post-World War II. You have these early modernists who visited at the beginning of the 1900s and kind of came, and that was a lot of a European influence. But then really the people like Lela and Rudy and the Dewises who came and stayed and raised family and had kids and taught the universities and knew one another. That was a post-World War II generation. And when they came to the state, they ended up staying, and they changed radically what art looked like in the state. And I think it's through those close associations, those close friendships, that we're able to see the story of modernism and contemporary art. Modernism came to the state very late in that respect. It happened much earlier in the country. And when they came, this was a state that was dominated largely by Charlie Russell and his influence. And you see that reference a lot. This was Russell territory, or the influence of Charlie Russell, or things like that. And it was a sea change that occurred here that allowed these radical, innovative, abstract, experimental works to be made. And the way that they did it was with such love and so humbly. It made it fairly accessible to a lot of people, and we're able to benefit from it here today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the Autios and just invite somebody from the family to come up and say a few words. They're all looking at each other. Which of us is it going to be? Thanks, Lisa.
Just like public speaking.
This is a whole room of friends, though.
Friends. Is this okay?
That sounds good.
I didn't know how this was going to work. I thought we were just going to have a walk around, but I would especially like to invite Mike Malloy to talk, because the Malloy family was huge for Dad and Mom at the Archie Bray, and I would like Mike to talk about Hank's piece way back there in the corner. The first piece is you come in, the doorway, and a little bit about the history in Helena. And then I guess we can just kind of walk around. Some of the lithographs over on that side, I had never even seen before. And Chris and I have been digging through all this stuff, and I thought, geez, I've never seen this before. And Dad and Mom just never bothered. I mean, once they finished with something, they went on to the next thing. So all of those early pieces, Mom did save, but they were buried in the basement. And I'm just glad. I wish they had been here to see part of this collection in one place. But I hope that Mike could come up and talk about the Milloy family.
My name is Mike Milloy. My dad was Pete Milloy, my uncle Hank Milloy. Hank had been an artist since he was 2, and they lived on a ranch outside of Townsend up Grayson Creek. And Hank went back east to, can you hear me? Everybody hear me out there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Softly.
Hank went back east to the Chicago Art Institute, and then Frank Macho, who was sort of a Charlie Russell style artist, was teaching at Columbia, and so he got Hank an instructor's job at Columbia, where Hank was exposed to Jackson Pollock and Kandinsky and all of these people who were experimenting with new kinds of art. And I don't know very much about all of this. I have almost a symbiosis with Rudy and Lela's kids, because we were raised with all of these people, and we assumed that everybody else in the world was also raised with all of these people, and so it was just day to day. I mean, we didn't think that, that somebody was going to be a great artist. We just enjoyed everybody's company and played in the pottery and grew up that way. Back to Hank. One summer, 1949, 48 or 49, and I think that painting back there was painted at the ranch up Grayson Creek. And Lisa has a story about the route that painting took to get on the wall here, through the 6th floor bathroom at St. Patrick's Hospital. In any event, Hank came out the summer of 1949. He used to come out every summer, and there was my grandparents built a little studio for him so he could work during the summer. And they were experimenting with some clay that they had found near the ranch. A place actually called Clay Soil by Canyon Ferry Lake. And but they didn't have a kiln. They didn't have any way of knowing how to make the clay pliable. But Hank that summer was out of money, and this was in the Depression. Let's see, this was in the late 30s, sorry. It was in the Depression, and so they decided to put on a play, and they put on a play, I think it was called The Drunkard, in the barn out in Townsend. And lo and behold, people from not only Townsend, but from Helena came out, one of whom was this short little guy who had clay all over his boots, and name was Archie Bray, and he came to the play. And that's how Dad first met Archie. And then they, because Archie was interested in the arts, and because Dad was looking for help to figure out how to work this clay, they sort of developed a relationship that really started again in 1944, 45, and Archie had this vision that he would like to have a place where people could come and work on their art, their ceramic art, and not have to worry about making a living other than working for Archie in the brickyard. So he and Dad sort of talked about some way of putting something together, and now we're in like 1948 or 49, and Dad had been not only working with Archie, but had been working with Francis Senska at MSU, and met a couple of students there. And so when Archie was looking for somebody to kind of start this seminal studio program that he had in mind, and also to work in the brickyard, Dad said, well, there's a guy flipping burgers at his dad's place in Bozeman, a guy named Pete Vokas, and then there's a fella, Rudy Autio, who was also a very good artist who was also interested in ceramics, and he's working at the Trinidad plant in Three Forks. And you ought to get them over here and see, and so Archie called them, and they both came over and started working, not only building the office, the main office there that's next to the house at the Bray, but also setting up a potter studio and developing a kiln, because they were using the brickyard kilns to fire their pots and their ceramics, and of course you can't control the temperature. Archie could control the temperature, but he wanted to control it for the bricks, and so they had to build a separate facility there to fire the works that they had done. And Dad and Hank built a pottery right outside of our house in Helena, and but also was back and forth because there was all kinds of collaboration between all of these folks. My Uncle Hank was interested. He painted landscapes, but he also painted nudes and horses. He loved to paint horses, and there's a plate back there with that Dad threw that Hank decorated with the horse. And I think, and that had an influence. I see that horse when I see Rudy's stuff, and they all collaborated and worked together, and it was just it was a sharing of ideas that I guess influenced things from that point on. But again, it was a magic time. I have very fond recollections of the times when Archie would come. He didn't. I don't think he was very fond of his wife, and so he would spend very little. He'd either spend his time baking bricks, or he would come into town, and I don't think he ever ate dinner out there. And he would come over to my folks' place, and he always brought two things. One, he brought mud on his shoes. He delighted in, he was a promoter of the arts in Helena, and he'd invite great Russian ballet dancers to come and perform, and he'd go pick them up in his old beat up boots and pants and shirt with dust with brick dust all over it. He just really enjoyed doing that, and they look at him and say, who are you? And then he'd come over, and he'd always bring his mud from his boots, and he'd bring candy or I remember Cheetos. And so we always knew when Archie was there, and again, and Hank would come out in the summers, and we just had it was a wonderful place. But again, that's the way things were. We really thought everybody else was growing up in the same kind of environment. Anyway, anything else you want me to talk about? Any questions?
What about the little horses?
Oh, well, the first time that they used the blue clay that Archie used for the brick out there, and he put something in it called grog that made it more pliable. And it was such neat clay, and Hank had not really ever worked in clay, but this was so nice. He sculpted an absolutely gorgeous horse. But the only place to fire it was in the big kill. The great big beehive kill. And so they cooked it in there, and it practically melted. I mean, it was just awful. So after that, they figured out how to properly cook the things they were making. And so Hank did another horse, and then he made some smaller horses, and they cast those in plaster, and then they made, I probably have 40 or 50 of those little horses. And he also did some steers, and yeah, he was a very talented sculptor as well as a painter. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions about any of this? I spent too much time.
I was hoping Jerry Rankin could talk a little bit about Francis and Jesse, the pieces we have over there, and his own work, and the printmaking department in the 70s. So, Jerry, where is Jerry?
Here comes Jerry Rankin.
Oh, here comes Jerry.
Jerry's piece is back here, this large painting, and a small holograph over there. And then he's also featured upstairs with a series of 6 drawings in the permanent collection. We're really delighted to have his work on view. Jerry Rankin.
Nice to be here. I'm honored to have sort of bridged 2 wonderful experiences. The Deweese family has been a graduate, and later the Autios, both Rudy and Lela. And I came to the Deweeses extremely naive. I had a tough time adjusting to Bob's way of teaching. He never really taught. You had to sort of be with him and study, and begin to realize that he brought with him a sort of eccentricity that was foreign to a small town guy like me. I was captivated by it. Some of the, having drawn horses and things that were more familiar as a kid. Bob showed a picture of Van Gogh's potato eaters one day, and I think I was enthralled that people could actually paint like that. And throughout our experience, the Deweeses, all of them, they were a family. And of course, I was happy to have been a member of their tribe. We'd have soirees every Thursday, little chamber get together. I played the oboes, and they put me in the bathroom. These things always ended up delightfully unpredictable. But it was a chance to sort of continue the relationship. It was a wonderful, fruitful time. We'd go to the beret and we'd see Rudy and Pete at work at the beret. They brought back these wonderful ideas. And of course, the Deweeses, who came in from Ohio, and all the rest of this group of people, Isabel Johnson, Ellen McCausland, Francis and Jesse, people that you all know, had this And a lot of them came through the GI Bill, who had lived abroad, brought back this wonderful cross-cultural mix that opened up this. Remember that this was a slower time. There was a generosity of spirit within all of these people. Looking at this collection now, I think that we all realize that this is a moment in time that will never be repeated again. This is, what you see today is a historical moment. It will never be repeated again. I think that Pat said earlier today, I hadn't realized this, that Laura had mentioned that Missoula is what, the fourth most influential museum in the country. I mean, this speaks worlds to you folks who are here today, this wonderful community. Rudy saved me from a lifetime of horror. I was on a grain chain in a sawmill in Idaho, and he encouraged me to come and complete my MFA in Missoula, which I was delighted to do after that experience. We had known the Autios, both Rudy and Lela, in Bozeman earlier. Rudy took the chance on me. I never probably should have gone to graduate school, but anyway, I found myself thrown out of the painting program and into, under the wing of Don Bunsey as a printmaker, and with sorties to the ceramic studio for Rudy. So I had this experience too. Meanwhile, I had these great instructors. It was kind of a strange time because we had a group of Ohio State people coming into Missoula at that time. And there was a lot of dissension between the old guard and the young Turks who were going to change the way we saw art according to the Eastern establishment. There was kind of a liaison. I sort of, being an older graduate student, I was sort of a liaison between the old guard and some of the younger people. Ted Riddell sort of saved me at my pre-candidacy orals. He seemed to recognize that the crude drawings that I was doing for a children's playground for developmentally disabled had some merit, and suddenly I was propelled into this graduate school environment, which I was glad to finish. Later, Lela and I became colleagues in the state teaching, both of us teachers into the state education system. She here, I in Great Falls. And we established this wonderful kind of liaison between, cohesive kind of, rather reverent kind of time together, which a lot of formal concepts of establishment art were sort of in place, and we're trying to free up loosen up the gang, the tribe, and teach our students to be who they were, not who somebody thought they should be. During these two times, these two different experiences between the Deweeses, the Autios, and incidentally, before I, on my clumsy way here of trying to sort through what I'm going to say next, I want to give a particular attention to Lela and Lisa, Tina, Anya, all these people who bought this collection together, and it was a yeoman's job to be able to try to pick and select and choose what was going to be seen here today. I was at the risk of trying to give personal opinions to what I think. I see the work. It's simply, I think most of you know what the work represents. It's a coming together of people who brought these wonderful experiences with them from where they had been into this strange environment called Montana, where the light was different, and yet they formed this kind of collective tribal experience. I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. I'm not used to public speaking. I would feel much more comfortable addressing a couple of questions that people might have that I might be able to answer. Is there anybody who has anything a little more, with a little more clarity than I've given you? Anyway.
Jerry, how about Francis and Jesse and what you remember Francis and Jesse?
Francis and Jesse. I had a job, a work-study job, grinding lithograph plates, lithograph stones, and so I was quite familiar with or became quite familiar with the litho process. The stones were only, they were fairly small, and so most of the work that you've seen through Jesse and Francis were small. I watched them work. I had ceramics from Francis, and I was given a failing grade because I was too lazy to learn how to throw on the wheel. And I had to repeat again. She knew that I had potential, but she didn't know quite where it was. But I adapted very quickly to the print process, the energy that went into the whole business of printing on stone.
Jerry, do you want to talk about your piece, your work over there?
Oh, my piece. Throughout the business of learning to see, instead of look, but the experience of light and writing that sort of timeline between temporality and duration, the light, the invigorating kind of cohesive, constant conversation between friends, opened me up to kind of a delightful sort of experience with color, which I felt sort of freed me up to, and I didn't feel any, was strongly influenced by what was going on in New York. Certain people were bringing back, who had been to Black Mountain and to New York, and the eastern cities had sort of opened me up to a lot of possibilities, what were going on. Richard Liebenkorn was one of my favorite painters, coming from California. And so there was this West Coast figurative group who strongly influenced what I was doing at the time. Of course, Bob's and Francis and Jesse, I think particularly, were kind of their careful guidance without being directive. But just the fact that we're continuing to open us all up to new experiences was quite something. Again, I'm tongue-tied.
Well, it's great, Jerry, thanks.
I want to thank you all for coming, and it's good to be with you.
I just wanted to mention that in 1949, Francis said, we've got a new painting teacher arriving. And so would Rudy and Pete go over there and help them unpack the car? Remember? Bob and Kenny. So Tina and Gretchen, can you talk about your whole family in Montana? We couldn't get many DeWeeses here, but we got 2 of them here. We got 4. We got 4 in the back. I thought we were going to walk around here.
I know it's hard, all these words, and everybody wants to hear what people are saying.
Yeah. So.
That's great.
I want to start by just saying there's 4 of us Denise's here because we have Clara and Jen also, and that's the next gen.
Yeah.
Actually, Jen.
Actually, Clara did point out there's not enough of that generation here. Say, Clara was pointing out to me that there's not enough of the younger generation here, and it's a shame because they're we need to carry this on. So we need to connect with them.
Let's see, I'm trying to think, we thought we were going to be walking around too, and none of us are too excited about public speaking. What I would like to say, for us growing up, like, is it Tim? Malloy? Mike. We had no idea that there was any exception or difference between us and the rest of the world. So we just went about our business as we thought everybody else was doing. But for us, it really wasn't all about art. I mean, quite honestly, we were the kids, they were the artists, our parents were the artists. We made a lot of art, and we did a lot of, sketchbooks and liked to draw horses, but mostly we liked the horses.
We used to help Daddy grade the sketchbooks. He'd bring this big stack of sketchbooks home, and he just hated grading. He'd start sorting out these sketchbooks, and Tina and I'd go over there and, oh, this one should have an A, they've got horses in it.
But we kind of learned to identify what was good drawing and what was bad drawing, and we could say, that's a good one, and that's not so good. But
I don't think I've ever learned that.
I just want to say that we all grew up together, and we would visit the Deweeses in Bozeman, and that was the church, or the Church Street house. And there were always parties, big parties, lots of music. Everyone was playing music, guitars. What else?
Well, we used to sit on the steps so we were kind of hidden, and we would listen to these conversations. Oh, that guy is. That guy is.
Riding horses.
I think we spent about half our childhood waiting for the audience.
it's true, because in our life, I mean, the high point in our life was hanging out with Lisa,
Lisa's coming to dinner, boy.
And we
We were
loved to
always
be-
late, always late.
We ignored the adults for the most part.
But when Lisa was living in Western Kentucky, after she was grown and her husband, she had, that was when Wally was little, and we live in Eastern Kentucky, and so Lisa called me one day and said, hey, we're coming over to visit you. Well, Lisa Lisa's coming to see us. So she said, well, she did be there around 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I'm watching the clock. I just can't wait to see Lisa. And 2 o'clock came, 3 o'clock came, 4 o'clock came. I said, some things don't change. But she did get there.
Yeah. But the Dewey's family was an amazing family, and they were always my second family, and there was always, everybody was attracted to Bob and Jenny, musicians, writers, everybody. The theater department in Bozeman, dancing.
Yeah, you know, we could refer to this painting that's on this wall back here, the painting of the studio. That was my dad's painting of the studio.
It's called Loose Lodge, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, yeah. And that was an amazing, that was Dad's studio. I don't know when he began to rent that, but he rented it for $27 a month for years, a long, long time, $27 a month. It was the entire upper story of that building. And it was the old Moose Lodge. There was a moose head hanging in there from the old days of the Moose Lodge. But, I mean, for us, it was just a plague palace. You know, we loved just being there. It was a really pretty funky place, you know. But the adults, they met there frequently. Now, they called them parties, but they were congregational. It was a congregation of people. It was during the days when the university was less delineated between the departments. And they had friends that were in all of the departments, in the music department, theater department, history department, philosophy department. They didn't isolate the way they tend to do these days. And so when these folks and I got together, they talked about stuff, and they drank a lot of beer, but but they really, they shared a lot of what was going on, and it was a really exciting time, because I think not only in the art field, I think that in all of these fields there was sort of some, you know, kind of revolutionary thinking going on. That's where Percy was, you know, he was among that crowd, and they were all, whether, you know, they didn't talk about quality. I don't think they probably, you know, talked about that word so much, but what they were talking about was what was new and exciting and you know, viable and authentic, yeah, in their fields, and they exchanged ideas. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know.
And we babysat for all of the kids.
Lisa talked about how we were all family, and I remember when I was a senior in high school, or I was about to be a senior in high school, and I kind of, you know, like a lot of kids that age, I didn't know what I was doing or, you know, where I was going, and kind of lost. And Tina and I were always really close, but she had gone to a different school and had a different circle of friends for a change, and I was feeling kind of left out. And one day Mom came up and said, Gretchen, Lela called and said, maybe you'd like to come to Missoula and stay with them this year and go to school in Missoula. And I thought, yeah, that'd be cool. And you know, at the time, I didn't really think about it from the perspective that I do now, and I think, my God, you know, inviting a teenage girl to come live with you, you know, I mean, can you imagine? But so I lived with Lisa and Lela and Rudy and the boys, and all the little spats. But geez, what a great experience. I mean, that was, I just value that so much now. Lela was like a second mother. Good times. I kept Lisa from doing her homework a lot.
Can either one of you say anything about the exchange of ideas between Bob and Jenny and Lela and Rudy? Things going back and forth. And I'm thinking about some of those early paintings of you, Gretchen, that are, you know, we see in the back of the gallery or something, where you can't tell the difference between the Autio kids or the Dewey's kids all painted together. But I'm wondering if there's other examples.
I don't know. I mean, I think what I could say about that is that because I think that there was there was no separation between art and life. It was a couple of families that intersected. And those guys, I mean, they just responded to their environment. They were simply dealing with what they had to deal with. They didn't leave the kids at home and go paint something else. They painted what was in their face, and that was us. There was a lot of us.
When Daddy died, we found a little card in his billfold, and it said,
It was in the sketchbook.
where's the sketchbook? Okay, well, it said, response plus ability. And that's what art is. It's a responsibility. It's the ability to respond to whatever. And, I think about that a lot I make a lot of art, but I don't really have any connections but in Eastern Kentucky, and I just make it. I don't sell anything, And I sometimes think, well, why am I doing this? It's just piling up. It's much harder. But then I think about that. I always think about that little thing that Daddy had in his pocket. That's just what you do. That's how you respond to your life. That's.
So yeah, I think the kids were a real integral part of their life, obviously. So
At that time, especially, that was.
But it really wasn't all about art. I mean, listen, a lot of our engagement with the Autios was go camping every summer, right? So every summer for a couple of weeks, for how many years? For a decade or more, a couple of decades, we would just travel up to Flathead Lake and hang out with the Autios. Campfires, cooking, songs, we all sang a lot.
Ghost stories.
A lot of ghost stories, we scared ourselves a lot. But yeah, and it is kind of interesting how big, I think that everybody picks up the threads of their own roots and they carry them on, in whatever way the context of their lives take them. All of us make art in one way or another. It is interesting if you're not in the core of that world. It is still interesting when you. I find myself when I step into the arena of galleries and of museums, I'm pretty uncomfortable with a lot of art that I see these days because it's not as good. And I feel like there really is something about the base of a root of an energy that happened during this period of time that became our prototype. So all of us, we just kind of pick up those threads and keep making stuff and value that process. I think more than marketing. Right? So yeah, I don't know what other. Does anybody have questions about? It was that there was an Autio to Luis connection for many years that we all cherished. We loved that for
All our life.
Yeah.
And before.
So yeah.
Well, I don't, this is kind of all ad-libbed, but would you like to get up and talk about working with, for all those years? Yeah, Hugh Warford. And Autio, thank you, Autio, for helping with everything from mixing glazes to making pies, dinner. Go ahead, Hugh.
So, first of all, I want to say about the art, because that's, I think, what's pretty important here. Rudy and Lela didn't collect art because it was an investment. They collected their friends. And these are all the friends. And so, as we worked for 25 years making art, or pots, helping Rudy and Lela, we would have coffee, or we would have lunch, and these pieces would be on the wall. And it'd be so neat because as we looked at them, I would ask questions about, well, what's this Dave Askeval guy like? And then he would pull up in this kind of all black, and he'd come in and be there for a little bit of time, and then he'd go away, and then we would talk about that person then through the years. And same thing, everything in here was their friends and their family. So to see this work together outside of the house and see it in a gallery situation, it's really amazing to me and to Anya, because she got to work around it too. And so it's nice, because we're all going to go away in the end, but all the friends are going to still be here. So working with Rudy and Lela, because they were a pair, and that extended family, Bob and stuff. I wanted to add something about that connection between Bob DeWeese and Rudy. Do any of the Lewis and Clark letters still exist?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. So this great friendship, they were always trying to one-up each other with what they do. So they would write back and forth as Lewis and Clark. And so, I mean, of course, I saw it from Rudy's side, and we'd wait for the mail because Bob was going to send something back. And here was this script, Captain Lewis, I've lost the Bitterits today, and all this stuff. And so then they would start. One of them started, and they'd make the letter, and then they started shrinking it on a copier. And so finally, here would be this, 300 word letter, and Rudy'd be down there going like this, and then he figured he could turn it out, and he went and got a copier machine, not to help with his art, but so he could blow those letters back up. So working with Rudy and Lela, I don't know why I was blessed. Certainly Doug Grimm came before I did and helped Rudy. I think the reason I came is I was a young person just out of graduate school. I had a lot of strength and vitality. And by this time, Rudy was in his 50s. And so physically, he couldn't do the big work like he did. So he got an assistant in, and I would do the physical stuff. But it was absolutely amazing. He just treated me just as anybody else, as he treated everybody. And Lela was the same. They're a circle of friends from Pete Vokus to Don Wrights. Same thing. We would go into a workshop, and so 3,000 people would come, and these folks, Rudy and Pete and Don Wrights, they were like rock stars. And well, why was that? Well, because they had taught so many people who had gone out into other universities and had connections with students and talked with reverence about these folks. But Rudy and Pete and Don and those guys, they never really promoted that. It was just from people who had been with them. And so they were very just common day people. That relationship between Lela and Pete was the most important though. That love relationship, which we've all seen, right? We saw that. And to see that every day, day in and day out, from the little fights to the arguments about how a figure set on a pot was pretty incredible. And Lela would always go, Jesus Christ, Rudy, a lady's foot can't fit that way. And so I'll tell you, I got a billion stories. I'll end on this one. So this film company came from New York one day to do a little story on Rudy. And we're in the studio, and we're making pots, and there's a director, an assistant director, and a grip, and a key grip, and an assistant to it, a big production. And so we're in there, and Rudy's really holding forth on the importance of something in ceramics. And Lela had been in the house, and an old dear friend had come up from Texas, and so Lela saw this person. She says, "Oh, Jesus Christ, Susie, I haven't seen you for 2 years." And the director and everybody, they were like, "What the hell is that?" And so things like that would happen. Anyway, so it's great to be here.
Okay,
Can we ask Doug and Gerald to come up?
Well, you know this old song, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. Boy, it's really true here with this couple. I think you all know that this old library wouldn't be a museum if it wasn't for Lela. That story's been told many times. Okay, I'll tell you about how we all get together here, all artists and anyone who's interested in the art, and we exchange our ideas and what we've done here. We also know about the arts through TV and radio and, well, the Missoula. Well, I went to college, and my first day, I was thrown into a Rudy Autio class because no one wanted to be in this class for this new guy, no one knew anything about him. And so from that day, which was about the third week of September of 1958, until the day he died, I knew Rudy practically every day because I just lived just a few houses from him. And I remember making all kinds of things with him, but as soon as I worked in ceramics for 4 years with him, graduated from college and went straight to New York. I wanted to do something else, and I worked in advertising for 3 years. I came back, but I also had a lot of journalism classes, and I went over to the Missoula, and I went to see an old friend I'd been in classes with, and I walked in, and I was standing there at the desk talking to this person, and along came this little short guy, and the employee said, "Oh, the new editor, this is our new editor, this is Doug Grimm." And he said he's been working in New York and in advertising, and he's an artist. And, "Oh, well, come with me." He took me to his office. The editor took me to his office. He said, "I've only been here a week." That was up here in the old Missoulian building, overlooking Higgins Avenue. Chuck sat down and he closed the door and he went behind his desk and he said, "I've got something here I want to talk to you about. I've had this woman come in and insist that I write this story about her husband, who she claims is going to be an important artist someday." So I often wonder, would Rudy be really known if it wasn't for Lela? I was in New York, and if you want to get somewhere, you get into a gallery with a nice Jewish dealer. Well, that's what she was. She was born in the Shoto, I think. Well, she knew how to do it, and he said, "Look, I've got this stuff here on my desk. Oh, here, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Oh, I said it's Autio. Oh, have you heard of him? Oh, yeah. While I was in New York for 3 years, he came there every year, and he gave a talk and had an exhibition at the Crafts Gallery there next to the Museum of Modern Art." Really? And then this thing here says he's going to be, he's been going to exhibit or something at the Greenwich House. No, it's the Greenwich House. Well, where's that? I said, "Well, that's in the middle of New York City." "Oh, I thought maybe, out in the sticks somewhere." No, it's a place where he's been invited to show his work, and it will sell. And at that time, his pieces were selling for $300 a piece. Well, then he said, "Well, usually we go out and we interview people, if they're going to do a play at the university or a musical performance, but we never had anyone come in and say, from the arts, you have to print this." And he said that one of the things he suggested was, maybe we should have an art page someday. And Dana, are you here? Well, pretty soon, Dana Broussard, fabric artist, started writing an article once a week. And then it sort of got into something bigger and bigger until, Doug Boland, raise your hand. Doug Boland, raise your hand. Well, he was sitting beside me, but anyway, hold this for me. Yeah. Let's take a look here. Oh, excuse me. hold that. Let's take a look at yesterday's Missoula. And so that one page is now developed into about 6 or 8. And it's called The Entertainer. And it's been in various forms ever since this new editor came along. And so this is, you can, thanks to Lela, she got this started. Okay, now we have Dave Askell here, or Dave Askell's brother. Dave, go ahead.
Gerald, yeah.
Gerald.
Well, my brother did nothing but art from the time he was a young kid, and he did this painting that's up here. And the story that I was told, I had never seen it until I walked in here yesterday for some strange reason. But I knew that he had, David had traded a painting for Rudy, a truck. I guess Rudy really wanted that painting, and he said, well, how about I trade this truck? I think it was 46 Ford or something like that.
A pickup truck.
A pickup truck, yeah.
They had it just sort of flat bed, you know, they took the body off, the truck bed off, but 2 floors down so you could haul hay, I guess.
Yeah. So anyway, but I didn't know the full story of the truck, and you can probably fill that in better in terms of what happened with this irate foreign student.
Missoula's first Muslim was invited to the university along with about 7 other students from different countries because the heads of the university decided that the university students needed to learn more about how people from other countries lived. And the student that came to the art department in Missoula around 1962 or so was Zia Masabi. In the 9 months here, I think he probably did about $1 million worth of damage here in Missoula because he loved setting fires in churches and the top floor of the art building and building trucks in your car. If you didn't give a good enough grade, he burned your car, and he destroyed all the pots that were in the pottery. When Rudy had, at the end of the quarter, Rudy had everyone bring all their pots in, and the next day, everything had been smashed with a hammer, except for one person. One person he kind of liked, and that was a person named Doug Grimm. And so Rudy called me up at 8 in the morning, and he says, why did you smash all the pots? Well, anyway, Rudy didn't give him a good enough grade in ceramics, and he saw Rudy's truck parked near his house over in the University District, so he took some paint solvent from the painting studio on the top floor of the art building, poured it on the seats and set it on fire. And he was so distressed when he read in the paper that the truck actually belonged to Dave Askell. It had just been traded 3 days earlier. And so we could go on telling stories about Rudy and Lela and the students. Go ahead, Gerald.
Well, I was going to say that my brother then had a Max Beckman scholarship back to the Brooklyn Museum Art School. And he had this truck, and I had just arrived back from Europe. I'd lived over there a little over a year and was broken off, didn't have any wheels, so I got the truck, which was marginal transportation, and it had a distinct burnt toast kind of. So anyway, I come back from Europe mainly. I've been teaching skiing in the French Alps, and snowball was just getting going, and I got offered a position to head up the ski school and ski shop and all that stuff. So I drove that pickup up to the parking lot in the fall, and left it in the parking lot, and then drove it down in the spring. And I have no idea what happened after that. So that truck may be immortalized somewhere else. But I was just going to say, Dave, you know, the thing is that David went from there to the Kansas City Art Institute and then offered a position at Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. And what happened then was he really got involved in many different forms of art. For example, one of my clients was a grandson of the founder of Alcoa Aluminum, so at one period, he met David, we went back to Pittsburgh, he gave him all the aluminum that he wanted for doing highly polished aluminum pieces, for example. But what happened was that then Canada claimed it, and there's not much reference to his background here in Montana, and yet the most significant events in his life happened here. And I would say of all of the influences along the way, that Rudy was probably the strongest one. They were good friends, and whenever he did get back from Nova Scotia, which was rare, he always wanted to see Rudy. He went and visited the Deweeses, John Buck, and some of that. But anyway, I won't go on, but he moved into the world of conceptual art eventually, and there's a bunch of stuff. I won't go on with his history, but he was really on the fast track for a long time.
I never met Gerald that I can remember until an hour ago or so. And I said, oh God, I remember your brother David Askvold. I got elected at the beginning of my sophomore year in college as art club president. And Dave said, you gotta come down and see my new apartment. And it was on Woody Street. It was the ground floor of what had been a two-story building on Woody Street, the corner. It's now a parking lot on the east side of the Silver Dollar Bar. And so we walked in, and it was just a barren space, and it had a cot back in the back. And I said, boy, Dave, this would make a wonderful art gallery, and we could sell our work here. And so we put partitions in, and I painted a big sign on the windows at Woody Street Gallery. And the Missoulian came by and had several stories about us. And it lasted until 1962. About 3 years, and that was probably Missoula's first art gallery, thanks to David Askvold and me. And here's Missoula's first art gallery, art museum. And where are we going to go from here? Shall we take over the courthouse someday? Or shall we go get that old library that they're going to take? Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
I wanted to go ahead and invite some of the artists up. I know Pat Zentz is back there, and I see John Armstrong and Jim Todd. Maybe you could come up and speak if there's anybody else. I don't want to keep you too long. We passed the hour mark, and you've been all very patient. But I think that we should hear from these artists. Thanks. Yeah, do it. Jump right in. Thanks, Pat.
Before I start, I want to address two Deweese granddaughters that I had the great privilege of meeting last night and talking with. You need to recognize in your wonderful youth that what you see here is reciprocated on the walls of our homes. We have their work in our homes. And every day I'm able to wake up and walk by many pieces. I'll tell you about one of your grandpa's works that's in my house that I treasure greatly, and I think it's one of the best things he ever made. It's a little piece he's made out of scrap pieces of wood that in the true Deweesian construction techniques, none of the corners match. It barely hangs together, and I've had to repair it several times. This really well-made box up here is mine. Bob used to say he loved showing with me because our work was so much alike. The piece of Rudy's that is the favorite of mine in our house is a drawing that's done with cattle markers. Dennis Voss and I visited Rudy late one night. I happened to be in town for some other business, and Rudy invited us over to his studio. And those were in the days where we all drank too much, but he, after we had drunk beer for a while, got out his black ink and a brush and his concertina. He started playing the concertina, and Dennis and I were just happy enough to start dancing around in his studio, and Rudy said, "You need women." And so, hoping the best and getting the least, he started drawing women on large pieces of paper for us, and we obliged by dancing with those. And then the mood got more serious. He pulled out his cattle markers and started applying color to these black and white drawings, and they ended up on the floor and everywhere. There were a lot of them, probably 20 of them. And then got his concertina out. We continued dancing and just talking and just having a great time, which was an amazing kind of thing with Rudy. On leaving, I got one of those, and it hangs in our house and has ever since I've had it. And it's unique because what it has on it are Rudy's footprints. From he had little feet, and his little feet, tennis shoes, are all over those women. So indelible. So you need to know that about your grandparents. It's an incredible gift. This show, the only way I can explain my response to this amazing gift that the museum and the family has given us is that they're sort of like, these pieces are like icebergs. They are just the tip of profound underlying relationships that you can't see. You just see evidence of them here. And it's the only way I can relate to them. I know many of these people who've made these pieces, and it's knowledge of the relationship that they had with Rudy and Lela, and Bob and Jenny's case, and in the case of that work, that makes me understand that's probably true of all of these pieces. I can't define either Rudy or Lela well, but I can share a bit of correspondence so you know what it was like to be a friend of theirs. The first letter I ever, and these are just very brief, the first letter I ever got from Rudy was in 1970, right after, 1974, right after I'd completed my orals. And it absolutely was pivotal in terms of how I thought about what I was doing. It erased some doubt I had because of the confidence that he expressed in what I was doing. I was too young to know what I was doing, but he saw that. So over the years, he would reinforce that. The letters didn't stop until he got sick. And some of them were serious, and some of them were not. This is one. This is a stationery. It's a picture of Rudy, if you can't see it in the back. And it begins like this. Dear Pat, I thought it would be appropriate to give you this small token of our friendship these many years. I have enjoyed using it ever since it was given to me by a Tibetan Vatican. And now I'd like you to have it. So with the letter was this boiled egg retriever from water made by Hamilton. A stainless steel. Somebody's either run over with a truck or he's beaten flat with a hammer. With this same picture stuck to it. And then he goes on, in chastisement. Thanks also for taking me to the wedding where I knew no one and got blamed for spilling a drink on the bride's father when he accidentally pushed my arm. You don't remember this, do you? And then, as always, it's all right, you're a pretty good artist, and maybe if you do, get out of line once in a while. Rudy. From Lela. I met Lela when I was in school here, but then my first job out of grad school was to teach at Bozeman High School, where I was hired to teach sculpture. And Lela, coincidentally, was the first artist in residence at that school, which, it was a brand new program. So I got a year, basically alone, to learn about Lela. She introduced us to the Deweeses. And she, too, would write frequently and always reinforcing of what I was trying to do. And she was probably the greatest inspiration to how I deal with young people today. She was greatly gifted. The difference between Rudy and Lela, they both had brilliant, scintillating minds. Rudy's laid back and some kind of bemused persona hid what was really dazzling kind of intelligence. And Lela, on the other hand, was way ahead of MRI and CT scans and all that stuff we use currently to see what our brain's doing, because every synapse that ever popped in her head was expressed in some kind of contortion, carving three-dimensional epithets out of thin air. And so the difference between the two of them was really a profoundly wonderful thing to experience. Anyway, I just want to give you the flavor of how her letters always were. This is, I don't know if you can see this, they made a trip to Greece. This is a Greek sculpture of Rudy recapitulating the pose of one of the arms. I'm sure you've seen it. So she had she was asked to give a talk, and rather than talk about herself, the title of the talk was 12 artists. So she talked about 12 different artists. And she asked for slides. Apparently I don't remember this, apparently I sent them to her, and so she writes this note back. Pat, how can I thank you for the slides? I'll make you an honorary member of my club. I'm the only member, but I'll accept you because when people see your work, they say, what the hell is that? Then she goes on in 2 sentences of unabashed praise, and I can't share that with you, but then she always like this. Hello to Susie. She always is curious and or inclusive of my family. And then this kind of thing, knowing her to be the political animal she was, we're all happy about Obama's win. So Lewis and Clark were one of the persona of Rudy and Bob. He developed this on his own with me. This persona was Herman Faltz, P-H-A-L-T-Z. He and Lela had bumped into one of my sculptures in some other city, and it impressed them. So you won't be able to see this well, but so he takes a feigned interest in wind and harnessing it as a German experimenter. And he writes these letters, and the drawings are only an Autio could do a drawing like that. But he can't figure out why it won't work, the plug's just too short, all of this. So he says in one part of this that he's concerned about a whooshing sound when it gains speed. So I become, in response to him, an engineer, and he refers to me as Dr. Zentz, subsequent to these letters, or the first letter. And I go through these, explaining to him that perhaps it is the fact that the cord is too short that makes it pull out, and suggest in engineer type term, using calculus and all of this, how you might hardwire this down, put the plug down here, move the light closer, and that might not be such a problem. And also maybe spreading the blades around. And I do this like it was a technical review. This goes on for 4 years. This is his last attempt. And the final one. So, when Rudy died, and the family held a memorial at the university over here, Lela asked me if I would speak at that. And it was a great honor. She says, Pat, how can I thank you for the wonderful address you gave for Rudy? I'll channel the last 4 words to you because if you're here, it's true of you. You're a good friend, Lela. You were guys like that.
Jim and John, would you guys come up? Thanks.
I'll start a little bit, I guess. Jim and I were at a really good place, a really lucky time in 1968, 69. I got out in '70. Jim was in Pensacola, Florida by then. But working with Rudy in the department was always a pleasure to us. The thing that I want to express from graduate school was that I didn't take advantage for who knows what reason. But on occasion, Rudy would ask, you know, if we wanted to come out to his place. They're going to have a party. Maybe Volcas was going to be in town or something. But I never wanted to be a groupie. And that was my weakness. I should have become one. When I talked last night, I said there's a lot of people that know Rudy much better than I, and that's one of the reasons. You know, and it was self-inflicted wound. So, you know, I always will regret that. But in talking last night about the weight that he and Pete and other artists in this room had on everyone, I think I want to tell you about a slideshow that Rudy unpretentiously showed at a workshop in Phoenix. And all he did was he had two screens. Pete was here and Rudy was here. And from that I surmised the relationship that was so necessary for both of them. Never know, I get so emotional. They both were at the Bray, everyone knows that. And everyone knows that Pete could throw a cylinder probably that high if he had long enough arms or implements to get it there. And I always perceived Rudy as more of a slab guy. I don't remember even passing through the ceramic slabs where he was teaching centering or throwing. I asked one of the graduate students, Chance and Ching, who taught these kids how to throw? Was it the graduate students? Because Rudy was always using slabs to build. And he couldn't remember. So we all know that we learned a lot at Eddie's Club if we wanted to from But in this slide presentation, you have Pete throwing forms at the break, and you have Rudy making his forms at the break. And then pretty soon, you see Volcas cutting up those thrown forms and putting them together like Rudy would with his slabs. And when we think about the importance of one or the other, I don't think any of this would have happened without that give and take that they had. I always think of Rudy as more of a painter, actually, than Pete, although we've seen paintings by Volcas that really were reminiscent of this kind of a painting, very strong and beautiful. But the impact of those two working together was miraculous. And I think in history, you only see it a few times. I think Brock and Picasso are good examples. You see it at the Black Mountain College, where real great minds work together. And it's really a powerful thing to happen. And I know that on a personal level, you know, it happened with me and Jim too. It was wonderful. And just, you gotta really embrace thing, the earthy quality of all of this stuff that those two people brought to all of art in Montana.
I wanted to mention a couple of things that have to do with Rudy's commitment to students, but via the bureaucracy. I had kind of a, not as close personally, but I had a, so I don't want to make this sound phony, but I had a unique relationship with him bureaucratically because I was his student and I was his colleague and then I was his boss. I wasn't really his boss. He, said I should be his boss. So, but it meant chairman of the department. But that meant that I knew him via the bureaucracy as well as personally from 1965 to when he retired. But the two events, the one event was in 1965 and the second event was in 1980. And again, the point of these two stories was how he always had other artists and his students and his program in mind, and his methods of dealing with it, which were unique in many ways. We all, as John was mentioning about the sculpture visit, or the ceramics, at that time in '65, which I thought was a good policy, we all had to take a certain number of credits from every area, no matter what our major was. So I had to take ceramics from Rudy. It also had this same experience with pot making because I wanted to learn how to make pots in a traditional way, and Rudy kept telling me to just make slabs. All right, so I didn't learn how to throw pots. And it wasn't my major, so it didn't kill me or anything. But one day, before they had the new good sculpture ceramic building they have now on campus, it was an old army barracks that was left over from the Second World War. And its location was the playground. I don't know, I've been retired for a while, but I still think the building is the home economics building that is across from the sculpture ceramic thing. And then, there's a playground there now. Well, when I went to school, it was an army barracks, and the ceramics and sculpture were done in the barracks. And winters, this isn't old man stuff either. The winters are much colder than they are now. And so, the wind came through the walls, and we had electric heaters and so forth. At one is, although there was something that was quite enjoyable about all of that. Anyway, things are very informal. Don't want to keep dragging things out, but things come to my mind. Jay Rommel, who was close to Rudy, and I think he has a piece in here, but I don't remember seeing it. Oh, yeah, it's that. I was thinking of Prince, right? Jay Rommel was a genuinely legendary character, and I have great respect for him. But anyway, he was making these plates, which I think actually influenced Rudy a lot with his own painting too, because Jay had never finished schooling, but he was known as a really good artist in town, and Rudy liked him a lot. So, but he was broke half the time, and so Rudy let him park his car out behind this barracks, and then he could work during the day for nothing. He didn't have to pay for credits or anything. But he became a kind of teacher along with Rudy. He knew so much about plate making and glazing and so forth that we automatically went to him as well as we went to Rudy. In any case, one day I wandered in there and Rudy was in there alone. This gets to the point about service, even though it's kind of a funny story too, but he was alone in there making a bear. And at that time he was, doing what was known as bentware. And so his making of this bear sort of intrigued me. It wasn't very large. And Rudy was very gentlemanly guy. He didn't get angry easily. He got angry, but he wasn't somebody who shouted and so on. And he was not a snob, so he was never sniffy when he was mad or something. But I was kind of intrigued with what he was doing. It was probably a little bit, maybe even out of place since I was a student, but I sat down and was watching him, and I said, Rudy, I said, what are you doing? And he said, the hell does it look like? I'm making a bear. And Rudy didn't talk this way, usually to people, you know. And so I didn't know why it was bothering him so much. And I don't remember anymore whether we talked about it at the time or later on when I brought it up to him, because we had these bear conversations off and on for many years afterwards. But he told me, and this is where his commitment was, two things here. One, that he was hating to do this, and I'd never seen him that upset about having work on something. And the other was that it was a way of his using the bureaucracy to get this new building. Because he'd been trying to get this building for a long time, and he couldn't get it. And so he told me, and many of the families have more accurate knowledge of this, you can interrupt me, but what my memory is, he told me that the president told him if he would make a mascot bear, they would mold it and give the trustees each a copy of it. And for that, he would get this building. Well, at first it was kind of a funny story, but as I thought about it, the story impressed me quite a bit, because he was willing to, to get this angry about having to do something that's different from the way he worked in order to get that building. And so that building to me is a kind of monument of, in a way, a kind of self-sacrifice, because for people who aren't artists, that may sound a little bit pretentious, but any of us who are really concerned with wanting to honestly do what we feel like, it can be very degrading to suddenly have to do something that we don't want to do. And Rudy, if nothing else, was a very free man. In later years, when I was working in the department, actually it's funny that I still feel funny lecturing about this, because actually I was always trying to get out of Montana, and I seem to have been fated to keep being dragged back. But anyway, when I worked with Rudy in later years, and they put the bear out on the campus, which is very famous. It probably made him, brought him his fame here in Missoula in many ways. But I really liked the bear artistically. And so he and I were standing out looking at it one day. This was probably in the 1980s or something. And I said, Rudy, I said, I know what you thought about that bear, but artistically, that's a really good bear. That just pissed him off. He thought it was patronizing or what? I wasn't. The last story, but again, it was, he knew how the bureaucracy operated. He knew how to stay away from it, keep free from it, but at the same time to make things work for art and for other people, which is what a lot of the discussion about this is, other artists and students. And this was a kind of mysterious thing. I had, again, gotten dragged back here in a way that was unexpected, I won't elaborate on, but I had been teaching in Florida for a year, and I was asked by the humanities department, which is separate from the art department, because I had a fairly extensive humanities background, to come back from Florida, where I was teaching humanities as well as art, and integrate art and visual art into the humanities program. So I did that for 10 years. And then, we have, as always, the school forever and ever is always under economic war. And so I spent most of my time having to try to keep the humanities program afloat. Rudy knew that, and he knew that I had managed to succeed. And the art department had had a lot of problems. I'm not aware of what caused them all. Ironically, despite what you mentioned, John, is that the 60s were, on the one hand, were a really great period for us. I mean, John and I agree with John. It was a great period to study art there because the whole social climate, as some of you know, was very inspiring at the time. But it led to a problem later. I wasn't there. I graduated in 1970, went to Florida. And apparently, after I was gone, they hired a number of people from outside state. And I don't know what all happened, it's not important, but there was a lot of chaos that went on. And I was told, even though this may be an exaggeration, that they'd had 10 chairmen in 10 years or something. And anyway, in 1980, I got this mysterious call one night from Ken Little, who many of you probably know. And he said he wanted to meet Rudy, and he wanted to meet me at a nightclub downtown. And it was about 10 at the time. And so this all seemed very mysterious. And I said, what do you guys want to do? And he said, we need to talk to you about something. So I went down, I think it was even at the old Flame, if it was still there. So the whole thing was almost like a kind of spy story or something. We met in the dark down there. It seemed very dark to me. And these guys, and this isn't the way, at least I don't think it is, this isn't the way usually the bureaucracy operates when they hire people. And Rudy said, would you like to be chairman of the art department? And I wasn't sure that I liked this exactly. And I said, because I heard about all the problems that were going on over there. And I said, I don't know, Rudy. I said, what all is in your mind? Well, they had had a really gigantic economic cut at the time, and got under pressures from people from the outside and so on. And what we decided to do was make an arrangement where if I would stay there for a couple of years, and if I didn't like it, I'd go back to humanities, and if they didn't like me, they could send me back to humanities, something like that, because I was going to break this 1-year cycle at least. Well, Rudy retired not long after that, but the whole point of that story was that he was really worried about the department, you know, and it wasn't so much that I was some glorious figure. He was politically, he was aware, I found out afterwards, of the stuff that I had to do for the humanities program. So it was a political decision as much as anything on his part. And it both changed my life and made me suffer profoundly. I mean, it was all for the better, but the reason as Rudy told me later, the reason we were meeting in a nightclub to decide this is because there were many people who didn't want me over there, okay? But he didn't hide that fact to me. He was quite open about it, so I never felt that I was tricked in any way. Anyway, over a long period of time, those two events come out in my mind, and they, I think, in their own way, support all the things that have been said here, you know, about his concern for the art world and students. So that's it.
Well, I think we should probably wrap up after going so long, but those were wonderful stories and wonderful remembrances, and we're really grateful for everybody for sharing, and for all of you for staying and being such good listeners. So thanks so much, and feel free to stay here and look at the art and talk to one